Well, hello again, everyone. I'm Dr. Foojan Zeine, and I am excited to have Wendy Tamis Robbins with me. She is the author of The Box, An Invitation to Freedom and Anxiety. She's a lawyer by day, writer by night, and a professional panic attacker. Yes, a panic attacker. Despite near crippling anxiety, she worked her way through Dartmouth College and law school before she was 30, and she set her mind to overcome the anxiety and panic attacks that increasingly limited her life. For the past 20 years, she's worked in the corporate finance, creating and preserving affordable housing and lending to the underserved communities. And what she says, which I love, says, now I don't just live my life beyond my disorder. I live it beyond my wildest dreams. Welcome to the show, Wendy.
Thank you so much for having me. It's wonderful to be here.
I know that you really put your whole life and the thought process and your healing process, all of that in your book. It is a part of who you are, and it's also a part of who you're not anymore. You really go through explaining the extreme anxiety that you've had. You wrote this beautiful, I love your writing. You wrote this describing it very well. You said, I describe my anxiety to myself as strong, argumentative, persuasive, manipulative, and opportunistic. I remember hearing it on a beautiful warm days when it slithered through quiet, sacred spaces like a snake in the grass, reminding me that the calm I felt was fleeting and my momentary peace was undeserved. Or when I rolled down the window of my car at the first spring day, and the moment I felt pure joy, the voice reminded me how easily I could die in a car accident. Or when I finally felt loved, and it convinced me that once my broken pieces were exposed, I should be shamed and abandoned. I really experienced anxiety when I read your book, and I've worked with clients. I'm a therapist, so I work with clients for 30 years. And I really, really feel what they go through. So share with us how you experienced anxiety and what it did in your life. And we'll go on from there.
Sure. So it started at a very young age, and it was, I didn't have the vocabulary at that age to really talk about it. And I was having panic attacks. They started at the age of 6. And, my parents would think that it was just an isolated incident and hope that, I was fine after it stopped. And they didn't really know the extent of the obsessive thoughts that I was having that was really creating this generalized anxiety as an adolescent, where I was having a hard time sleeping and concentrating and really focusing on anything else other than these, catastrophizing beliefs that I was having. And so over time, I started building these walls that were made of things like destructive perfectionism and, hyper controlling behaviors to control my environment, thinking that if I could just do that, then they wouldn't create anxiety for me. But over time, I realized that, even through all of my achievements in creating this picture perfect outside persona, that really wasn't where the anxiety was coming from. It was really coming from inside of me. So it wasn't until I did that work that I really began to find freedom. But for me, it was, anything from, like I said, generalized anxiety. So every day having that debilitating those thoughts that would just be obsessive in my mind and running those tapes. And then it would become debilitating on a physical level as well, where I went from a college Division I athlete to somebody who couldn't really even walk around the grocery store without a cart holding me up. And then bouts of depression as well, and suicidal ideation in college. So it really was spiraling out of control for a very long time with, panic attacks on top of that, probably 3 or 4 a day. So that was really when it was at its worst.
And I've worked a lot with teenagers and young adults, students, which they do experience the anxiety, and they really have no idea what to do with it. It feels like an attack coming, and they feel powerless against it. And I get what you're saying, where you created all of these other coping mechanism around it to make sure that you, in your own way, having the ability to maintain and manage it. But it's the other way, where the more that we try to control the external world, the more that it becomes apparent to us that that we're more powerless against the same technique over and over again. And what I'm hearing is you started looking at what you can shift inside, and it wasn't about, handling the outside anymore. And you were very high achiever, so it seems like the more that the achievements were there, the more you needed to maintain it, become more perfect, control everything out there, which kind of like collapses because it's just not a realistic thought process. So how did you experience going in and shifting and looking at the catastrophe, as you called it, internally?
I really had to go back. I had this amazing epiphany one day I was always unable to meditate, like my early therapist would suggest, well, if you have anxiety, then meditate. And I always thought I would fire them, honestly, because I was like, there's just no way with the thoughts that are going on in my mind. I can't sit and just, be still and be quiet. And I was terrified of going into my mind. So it just was not even, it was a non-starter. But I did have this one moment of coaching with Martha Beck, who's a very famous, writer and life coach. And she gave me this amazing meditation where you just watch an unbroken horse run in a ring for, as long as it takes, for several minutes every day, and then sit there. For me, it took about 3 weeks until that horse stopped running. And that horse represented my anxious thoughts. And as I sat with that horse, every day things shifted inside of me. It was a place for my anxious thoughts to really run and run. And then it was also a place to process all of this anxiety that I had held in my body for decades. So once that horse stopped, it was a very profound moment for me, where I suddenly felt this sense of peace that I had never felt before. And it was really there all along, underneath all of that anxiety. But it was as if I had burned off the anxiety and then discovered what had been there all along. So it was really a jumping off point for me to start this meditative practice. And so soon thereafter, I had another meditation where I remembered being in this box as a child. My parents had bought this new refrigerator and put the big box that it came in, the cardboard box, in the living room for the kids to play in. And I remember being the only one that went in that box. And I knew that I really didn't go into play. My childhood was a kind of a volatile household, because there was generational mental health that had gone untreated. And so there were, it was chaotic at times. So I would go into this box to retreat. And when I had that meditation, it was one of several, there's a few others in the book, where I realized I had to go back in order to find the source of my anxiety, really, in order to figure out if I could ever be free of it. So I went back to that little girl in that box and would meditate and just sit with her. And then I brought her out of that box, and I literally went through, I could see through my anxiety where all of the open wounds still were in my journey. And I went back and just healed those places and reparented myself and did work like that when looking into my past. And then as I was doing that and writing about it, a lot of the writing in the book is from those types of sessions, I would also do a lot of exposure therapy, right, to retrain my brain, because for so many years I believed that everything would be the worst case scenario. I would die if I sailed or hiked alone, or just all of these things that, other people can do. And so in order to, like I said, retrain that part of my brain that believed those worst case scenarios had actually happened in my past, I had to go do them and live through the panic, live through the anxiety, and teach myself that it could be true for me.
How is the process to do something alone? So obviously, what you did was a lot of what we do in therapy, which is going through, sitting down and looking at what's going on. Part of the awareness integration that I created, it is the awareness, and then you go integrate the past and everything, which is the healing and coming back and creating creating goals and setting up and moving forward. There is, when I also created the model and did it in Cal State Long Beach, people didn't do it with a therapist. They just did it through their journaling. We just created a guided system to do it. How was it for you to do this on your own? I know sometimes when we have a lot of traumas in our past, that when we go back into the spaces where we're really observing and looking and going back into some of these memories, that at times it helps when there's someone else who's holding your hand or giving you a vision of what's going on, or when you are in your pain, that gives you a bigger picture of it. But I also know that I've done a lot of self-help work on myself, and I'm hearing you've done it, and I've through books and the methods, I've also had other people to do it. But I just wanted to know what your experience was going through this process, because obviously you have those systems also in your book. And so if people are going to read the box, so how would it be for them to go through this journey with who they are without anybody else, a therapist or a coach holding their hands?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. I had several therapists up until that time, where I didn't get as much out of it because I wasn't willing to share as much as I should have, right? I felt like exposing all of that, especially when I first went, right? My first time I was at Dartmouth, and I thought that they would send me home from school, send me to a hospital. I didn't really know what would happen. So I was always afraid of the consequences, really. So I really, like I said, wasn't getting as much out of it as I should have. So I felt a safe space when I did it alone. I was more able to dig as deep as I needed to with my journaling and my meditations and things like that. And then once I really started writing and understanding that I could be writing for somebody else, it almost became part of the mission, like that I had to do it not only for me, but for them, to get as deep as I possibly could, just a place that I wasn't able to access with somebody else sitting on the other side. Because I felt, whether I felt judged or too vulnerable or whatever it was, I just didn't allow myself to go there. So for me, doing it alone, but still having all of the tools from all of the self-help books that I brought with me and all of the things that I had learned in therapy, right? Like I showed up at the door with bags of tools, and then I picked up my pen and threw down my meditation mat and was ready to go. So it wasn't just, me, showing up by myself with nothing to bring to the table. I still definitely had all that other help with me.
It's so interesting. I've worked with clients who they become very cognitive and cerebral within the conversation that we have. And then in the between the week on their own, they do give themselves permission to purge all of the emotions that show up for them. So there is a very much of a truth into a self space, that a safe space that we create for ourselves. Let me and the audience know, how did you create that safe space for yourself? Because as you described in your book, the space of anxiety, it is such a self-sabotaging concept, and you called it a self-saboteur. And it doesn't feel safe. It's constantly horrifying you. Like, what if, the worst case scenarios are always in front of your face. So there is something about how to create that safe space where you could actually watch this and not get triggered with it. It's watching that horse while not panicking as if the horse, you are the horse that is going to run away and not know what to do. How did you create that type of a safe space where you could actually go in there and have that trust that you could watch this and be okay, and then to finally be in your in the calm underneath all of the chaos?
Mm-hmm. I think that it was one of those early meditations right after that whole horse few weeks of unwinding all of that, where I realized that anxious voice that I had heard, that manipulative, angry, voice that I thought was doing something to harm me, right? I was so afraid of it. I realized that it was that little girl inside that box trying to manipulate and control, really to save me. So that was a pivotal moment for me in my own healing, because I didn't then look at it as something that was trying to harm me. It was something that was trying to save me. So that shift changed everything. And so when I went in, I was going in to save her as the adult versus push her into the shadows or, get rid of something that wasn't good for me. It was more like, no, you're coming along and I'm going to show you why everything's going to be okay. I'm going to show you that I love you and that you're safe. And so in healing her, I was obviously healing myself. And so going in to do that healing became a very safe place for me.
It's very important what you said, and I want our audience and listeners and viewers to really, really hear that although it appears very uncomfortable and at times as if it's the enemy that's talking to you or trying to scare you, that it is your vulnerable side that is trying to protect you. Even though it's vulnerable, it is that part of you that uses that vulnerability to remind you about how to be safe in the future. So in all the ways, it's trying to protect you. And what you're saying is that you saw that as a good intention. You saw there's a vulnerable place in you that not only needs your healing, but also doesn't know about your other strength. So it's just trying to protect you and hold a beautiful intention, although it doesn't have access to all of your strength. And it seems like when you came in and kind of held in and got access to all of your own strength, which as you've grown up, you found powerful and moving forward, then it was the time of holding the hand of the vulnerable girl who was in the box and then taking her to everything she was afraid of and gaining skills. And that's where I hear you talk about exposure therapy, which you went into the things that you actually could not face and you were afraid to face, but you started facing it and learning new skills and moving forward. Share about that, please.
Yeah, I think that what you're saying is a mindset shift, right? I was in such a fear mindset, being so afraid and critical of myself for not being able to control my own thoughts and bodily sensations that were coming with all of those thoughts, right? I could control everything else in my life except for what was going on inside. And I think that critical part is when you're trying to, it makes you even more afraid of it, right? And you try to push it away. And that's that fear mindset versus shifting into that growth mindset where you're not afraid of it anymore and you're actually trying to take care of it, And I think another part of that too, that's the anxiety, but I know a lot of people would probably say, well, how can you feel that way when you're having a panic attack? Like that feels like you're actually going to die. Like where does the compassion for yourself come when you're triggered like that? Once I understood what was happening from a neurological perspective, that my brain actually perceives an actual or perceived threat. It may not be real, of course, but knowing what happens in my brain to actually save me from that threat, that was a shift as well, because those panic attacks terrified me in the moment. And now I'll still have them, but I will sit there in it and understand, go through that process in my mind. Oh, this is what I thought. So my brain got triggered. And these are the hormones that are running through my body in order to save me. And I will just wait it out, for 10 minutes, and then I feel fine again. That's just a very, very different, it was monumental for me to have that shift, so that you break that fear cycle, right? Because the more you fear it, the more it's just going to be in control. You're really giving up the keys to the car, right? They're in the anxieties in the driver's seat at that point.
You're also describing what we do in meditation, where we kind of watch, we're in it, and then sometimes we can rise above it and watch us in it. And then as we rise above it and kind of like see what it is, we don't have the same type of emotions about it because we're observing it from a little bit of a space above. And from there, it seems like then you can access the safe place and knowing that it's okay, you can handle this, that you're not actually, you're not in a physical harm, and that it is a movie, it's a film that it's created, and that you're not necessarily in it. You could be right above it and watch it versus being the actress in it. And that's what I'm hearing, that it supported you. You've talked about anxiety, now using or being with your anxiety as your superpower. So can you share what it is that you're using it now as the superpower? How are you utilizing it to be beneficial in your life?
Sure. Well, now I feel like in the present moment, being able to be aware of those thoughts and change them so that I am living my life in such a more conscious way. There's so much more intention in what I'm doing, because I can be that, exactly what you said, I can be that observer versus reacting to the emotions that I'm having in the moment, right? Like understanding that my emotions and my feelings have been triggered by a thought. And so backing into the results that I want by going back and understanding the thoughts that have, started that emotional process, whether it's causing me anxiety or feeling depressed or something like that, that I can actually go back and, have conscious intention around how I actually want to feel and act and what my results will be. In the future, this has been one of the biggest shifts for me, because I was living in a place of resistance all of the time. Everything I was saying was, no, I can't do that because I have anxiety, or they don't understand that I'm not going to be able to do that because I have anxiety. That was always my excuse, right? And so those were incredibly limiting beliefs. And that was a big part of the book, right? Understanding at some point that having that awareness that that safe place I had created was really a prison. So now when I look at things, whether they're opportunities to adventure or a new relationship or a new job or something like that, rather than reacting from that place of resistance, knowing that I can handle anything in terms of anxiety that I think was before going to limit me and stop me from doing any of those things. Now, if I feel that anxiety come up inside of me at all, I actually know that that means it's a place that I should go. That's actually where my path is leading me, because it's a place to build resilience, right? So I'm living now from a place of yes all the time, and all of these doors continue to open, whereas before it was the complete opposite. So I feel like anxiety's really given me that tool and that gift.
And as we go through your book, not only you're sharing your own story, but you actually are giving people the path. You're giving people step-by-step guidance. So can you share what people are going to be gaining as they read your book, The Box, An Invitation to Freedom from Anxiety?
Sure. I think that, and I didn't even know really that I was going to share this until about halfway through writing, because originally I just was writing to save myself. Really, it was such a cathartic process. But about halfway through, I did see this process unfolding where if you have had, and so many of us have, had some sort of trauma in the past, right, that has triggered these coping mechanisms like perfectionism and hyper controlling and hyper vigilant and things like that, that then create anxiety. They will see how I went back and kind of dug up all of, not in a bad way, like digging up the past where you can just leave it settled, but overturning every stone to find out what the treasure underneath is. That's really what I did in going back and healing those open wounds, right? They were all of these pain points that were continuing to cause me anxiety without me even knowing it. So they'll see how I went back and did that and probably see themselves in it and see a path to do it on their own. And then also halfway through the book, as I shift into more of the exposure therapy, more of like traveling overseas alone, or, skiing and sailing and race car driving and things like that I never thought I would do. I think that that's the next stage where they'll see, now that you've healed the past, what can you do now to step outside of that box that you've put yourself in, how to see all of those bricks and why they were built, and now how to dismantle them. And then finally, it's really about how to live that life, because there's always those breadcrumbs, right? Showing you how to find your way back into that safe place and stay in your comfort zone. And so at the end, it sort of shows, in an illustrative way, how to stay outside of your comfort zone in that box and really continue to live your life beyond, like I said, your wildest dreams, really, if you just keep pushing those limits.
It's interesting when you hear a lot of what we go through another person's path, that it isn't a direct message, but yet it is a message that as we see another human being go through the path, we also get the courage and we also get the know-how. So through your story, through your experience, people also can see, one, they're not crazy. They're not alone. We all go through some of us more than the others, some of us more sensitive. We're born more sensitive, or the environment creates a space where we become more sensitive to whatever's happening in our environment, and then how to go back and create a healing space for ourselves. And I think this is one of the most important gifts that you have done with the book, The Box, An Invitation to Freedom from Anxiety, where you're sharing from a very vulnerable place, very personal place. And you also have gone through the path. So there's a knowing in there. It isn't just an idea. There's a knowing, there's an experience. It's going from the vulnerability to your strength, to your resilience, and showing the path to people and how all of that gets created. So thank you for sharing yourself with everyone who's around you. How have you, with this newfound strength, let's say, run your life today in your career? And I know that you also work with companies, large companies, about bringing your forte, and then you're obviously also an attorney. So how do you bring this space now into your work with people and clients that you work with?
It's been really an incredible journey. For so long, for so many years, decades, I was hiding my my mental illness, my mental struggles from the law firms that I worked at, my clients. So as a lawyer, I saw it as the two worlds could not be combined at all. And then when I wrote the book, I knew that I would have to obviously tell the partners at the firm at some point that this was happening. And I was met with such open arms. It was really overwhelming. And they didn't just say, well, congratulations. They actually have brought me in to speak to everyone at the firm and do wellness programs. And from that, now I'm doing wellness programs for other law firms and for other, I've spoken at colleges and for organizations and associations, for professionals. And it's just every single person even my clients, who I thought would be the biggest taboo, right? Because I feel as though as an attorney, I'm held to a very high standard in terms of my mental capability, my clarity, my ability to do my job. And when I became vulnerable with them and let them know that this is what I was doing, each and every one of them had their own story, whether it was their own struggle with some anxiety or mental health issue, it was somebody that they loved in their family or friends. And so it is so pervasive that it has just been an overwhelming response that I've received. And you can tell just by how much it's resonating, how much it's been needed and for so long. And especially since we're coming out of the pandemic, that I think it even heightens it more. So it's really been really gratifying for me in being able to have these not only one-on-one coaching clients, which is always, you know, an amazing relationship, and that's wonderful, but to have these big open spaces in the corporate world, to see them also see it resonate there as well, I think is really important, and we need more of it.
Beautiful. In 1 minute, if there's anything we haven't touched upon and you really, really want people who are listening and viewing us to know about you or your book or your journey, this is the time.
One thing that I do want to say, it's not so much about, I guess it's about my journey, because my journey right now is so much about ending the stigma that surrounds mental illness in our country, and I'm sure around the world. But I think that it's really important that we, find empathy, we educate people, both the sufferers and the non-sufferers, so that they have the tools and the skills to help those who can't really help themselves in terms of treatment. And then just to empower those who aren't suffering as well, because I feel like it's really difficult for people to reach out and try to help when they don't feel like they have the tools to do so. So yeah, those are the things that I'm really trying to communicate and focus on these days, just to I love promoting the book and the story, and I want to help as many people as possible, but I also love crossing over and trying to help those who aren't suffering to understand what's going on so that they can be part of the solution that is ending the stigma.
Beautiful. So everyone, Wendy Tamis Robbins, please get the book, The Box, An Invitation to Freedom from Anxiety, and you can go to wendytamisrobbins.com and so you can meet her and get the book if you like. Thank you so much for spending the time and being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
And for all of you who are out there, create an amazing life for yourself and everyone around you. And until next week, bye-bye.
Togetherness Media. Togethernessmedia.com.